Hello, my name is Catherine, and I have multiple sclerosis. This is the story of my diagnosis. It was 2019, and it was the day before Thanksgiving, and everything was great. I was on cloud nine. I just recently got back from getting a second place for a solo at a dance competition, and I felt on top of the world. That night, we were watching TV, and I'm sitting on the couch, my feet are up, and all of a sudden, both my feet start to have pins and needles, like they're falling asleep. And despite doing the normal things to try and wake them up, they just won't. And though I'm concerned and frustrated about it, and it hurts, I go to bed and go to sleep. I wake up the next morning and I'm numb up to my knees. And I'm starting to get a little more freaked out. But it's Thanksgiving, family's coming, there's stuff to do. Hopefully it's going to go away. It doesn't, and by the next day I wake up and I'm numb up to my waist. And I call and I try and get an appointment, and I make an appointment for Monday to see my doctor. At this point, things continue to progress. And by halfway through the day, I'm now numb up to my waist, all the way up through my core to basically my nipples. And I start to get this feeling like somebody's hugging me. But not like a good feeling, just like a little bit of a squeeze right around my middle. Or like maybe you're wearing like a little bit of a waistband, but that's kind of high up at your ribs. So then I'm starting to get real freaked out, and at this point I don't want to wait till Monday. So I go to the ER. And they do an MRI of my spine, and they tell me my spine's fine, and they don't know what's happening, but have I been sick recently? And I said, well, not particularly, like maybe a few weeks ago. Well, the doctor says, I think you may have Guillain-Barré. And so at this point, I'm kind of freaked out, and he says he wants to do a spinal tap. And I was like, well, is that necessary? He says, well, I'm going to talk to the neurologist on call. So he comes back and he says, well, the neurologist thinks the spinal tap's not necessary and you should follow up with him on Monday. So I am sent home with a little pamphlet on Guillain-Barré and instructions to come back if I stop breathing or have severe motor loss. So I don't think we slept that night. And it was a really rough weekend. By the time I got in to see the neurologist at the beginning of the week, I had a tighter squeeze feeling where I would describe it more like I was wearing one of those like waist cinchers around my ribs. And these two fingers had also gone numb. And the neurologist says, well, I mean, when you went to the ER, they didn't look at your whole spine. Not your whole spinal cord. And I was like, okay. It says, we need to look at your cervical. So we set that up. And at the time, I felt really unlucky because I didn't have insurance. And that meant things was out of pocket. But in retrospect, there was sort of a blessing in that I was able to get the MRI fairly quickly that same week, I believe. Now, otherwise I'd probably have to go through some crazy approval process, who knows how long. But we got the MRI back, and there was inflammation in my spine. And a 6mm lesion in my spinal cord, assumably causing my symptoms. So at this point, the doctor says, well, we need to get you some steroids, and then we should probably take a look at your brain. So we try to get IV steroids, and because I don't have insurance, nobody wants to give me a spot without making me jump through hoops and pre-approvals and proving that I can afford it and be able to pay them. And I just need to get this stuff in my system, because as the days go on, I think it took 3 days of trying to get steroids. More of my fingers started to lose a little sensation. Just not as fully pins and needles, but just like a little bit. And so we call the doctor back, and I'm a mess. And he says, well, we can do this as pills then. Let's do this as pills. It's unconventional, but we can do it. So I take 15 pills at a time, 3 days in a row of steroids, and it did bring back most of the sensation into my legs and feet, but I still had issue with my hands, and that squeeze just still continued to get worse. After, I don't even remember how long, maybe a month, I finally got the MRI back from the spine and from the brain, and got the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And by the time I got diagnosed, I was in such severe pain from the hug sensation that it felt like my ribs were being crushed, and I could barely get out of bed. I could barely sleep. My partner was having to help me stand up and sit down off things because my core was so hypertense and I was in so much pain I could barely move. And I got to the point where I couldn't even hold a fork properly with my hands because they just weren't responding properly. And eventually we got the diagnosis, and after some investigating of my own and some attempts with some drugs that weren't effective, I eventually found something to help with that MS hug. But that's my story of how I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It was a really insane onset that happened pretty dang quickly over a few days, with sensation loss. I'm lucky to have not really had a lot of motor difficulties at this point, but definitely suddenly having large portions of your body go numb is not an exciting experience, and was definitely terrifying. So if you're looking to diagnosis stories and trying to find some sort of a relief in the fact that you're not alone and someone else has been through this crazy experience, then don't worry, you're not alone, and that's sometimes how it goes. In a way, I feel lucky that I'm not one of those people that took 20 years to have a diagnosis, but it also was a very life-changing experience to have everything in my world turned upside down so suddenly. Things get better. You'll learn ways to manage, and you'll find drugs and treatments to help you with your symptoms. The one thing I can really say to anyone newly diagnosed is your doctors don't know that much either. Do your research, read about things, try things, look at little things that can help your body overall. I've had some help from things like probiotics and supplements. So, keep your mind open to multiple avenues of treatment if you can. And I wish you all of the best love and luck with your journey with multiple sclerosis. Thank you for watching.